that one. Talking all that bullshit. I'ma put it to you like this, yo.
This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me, I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
What is poppin', everybody? And welcome back to another very special episode of the Only... I can't do it again. What the fuck? What's poppin', guys? How you doing today?
What? Are you all right?
No.
You have one job, bro.
I'm in pain right now.
I just thought you changed
I forgot
it to...
whatever.
Yeah, so you changed it from special episode to very special episode.
Oh, that's
so
what
I
it
just
is.
thought you were just saying it's a very
It's-
special episode.
I don't know why I keep trying to put very in there.
It's New Year's Eve.
I keep
We
trying
got
to
Barber.
I keep trying to throw very in there. I did it yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm
That's because
upset.
it
A lot of Marys. Merry Christmas.
is very, very, very merry.
I'm very, very merry. What's poppin', Burke? How you feeling today?
Penn State actually won the Big Ten?
No.
According to your shirt, they did.
Oh, this is old.
No, I'm saying ever.
2016.
I'm saying like literally ever.
Yes, they've won it a few times.
I didn't think
I
since
know.
94.
What does this say? 2016?
16.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
been a while.
It's been a while.
Sounds like 8 years or so.
Oh, this might be the year. They got the path.
They have the path, Burke.
Yeah.
Boise State today.
Yeah, that's nice.
It's nice until,
Oh, whatever. I
Ashton
mean, they get
Genty.
upset
if they
by,
get up, right,
they deserve to lose.
right, exactly. But I mean, I'd rather play Boise State than Oregon.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Ohio State and Oregon play tomorrow. Like,
Yeah.
they're probably the two best teams.
And then if they advance here, they get the winner of...
No. Notre Dame and
Georgia.
Georgia.
Yeah.
Right. So that's good too.
Okay.
Georgia's. I think they don't. I think their starting quarterback is out.
Oregon is the #1 team in the nation, right?
They are.
They are, but Ohio
They're
State's
actually
the favorite.
getting points.
Yeah.
I saw that. I was going to take them from my weekend warrior, but went with
It was...
TCU instead.
It was I think it was a single score game
Very
last time
close
they played Ohio
in
State.
Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this
And
is a
Penn
neutral
State
site.
played them relatively close as well. So Oregon's a little sus to me.
Yeah.
I don't think Penn State's
No.
very good.
Penn
For what it's
State.
worth. I think they're a top 10 team. I do not think they are a top 3 team. Their defense, a little shaky. Not linebacker you like it
Defense
has been
is
in the
good.
past.
No,
defense is good.
They got a really good defense.
Yeah, they gave up like 45 to fucking Oregon.
Oregon's got a really good offense.
Okay.
Oregon has Dylan Gabriel, which is one of the best
Yeah.
players in the country.
But do they have the Heisman winner that you bet all the oh, no, wait. No, that's right.
What?
He didn't win.
Whatever.
What I've learned from football in the last 10 years or so is that a good offense beats a good defense.
Yeah,
Every day
tell
of the
that to
week.
the fucking Bengals.
What? Tell
What
that to
does
the
that mean?
fucking Giants, the Ravens, the fucking Jesus Christ. A good offense beats a good defense? Hell no.
The Ravens don't have a good.
The Ravens defense sucks.
Yeah.
When they won the Super Bowl, they had the best defense, and they had Trent fucking Dilfer as their
I
quarterback.
said in the last 10 years. That was 24 years
I
ago.
don't know about that.
Conrad's point is correct. His examples are terrible.
Right.
He
What do you
said the
mean?
Giants.
Well, how the fuck do you think the Giants won the Super Bowl?
I don't know.
When did the Giants win the Super Bowl?
Your first ballot Hall of Fame
What happened?
quarterback.
I said in the last 10 years because yes, this used to be the case,
No,
but
it's
not
still the
anymore.
case.
That's the Bengals.
What does that mean?
They have the best
They have
offense
the best
in the league,
offense in
and
the
they
league
suck.
and the worst defense in the league. Please cut to him.
I don't
You're
understand.
just staring
Right,
off into
because
the
what does
void.
that have to do with what I said?
You just said a good offense beats a good defense.
Right, I'm saying if you have a good offense and you're playing a good defense,
Yeah.
the good offense is going to score points on that good defense.
Oh, yeah.
Well, everybody scores points.
We heard that the offense has the advantage.
Over the defense.
Yeah.
Over the good defense.
I disagree
Yes.
with that.
Same.
The Steelers mop the fucking Bengals because they have a really good defense, and the
and
Bengals.
the Bengals put up 30-some points on us.
yeah, but
Right?
like 30 points is we're the average has risen.
Baltimore put up 30-some points on us.
Well, that was different. They got mopped.
Yeah.
They put up 29, and they haven't scored 30 points yet this year. Or no,
They
that's
put
the
up,
Chiefs.
That's the Chiefs. They put up 29. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, teams are scoring. Like, I feel like the way offenses are built
You're right
now-
that like 4 scores
Right.
is much more common.
Yeah, like offenses are built now. Like it's just that, like when you have a really good defense and you have a really good offense, they're going up against each other. It's usually not going to be like a low scoring game. They're not going to like hold them to 10 points.
Well,
Like it's hard to hold a good offense
just doesn't-
to 10 or 14 points.
but that just like doesn't really happen anyway. Like, you don't pitch shutouts anymore in the NFL. The game's played between the 30s.
This is
Like,
what my point is.
yeah, but like your point is not. It's not a novel one. It's not really an important one.
Like it's the other way around too. If you have a bad offense, you're not going to just put up points against a bad defense.
Well, yeah, I mean, you will at times, but like, yeah, a bad offense is going to score less.
Right.
But
a bad offense is going to score a lot less against a bad defense than a good offense is going to score against a good defense.
I can't have this conversation on air. You're just like
I'm stimming over here.
he's just like saying the dumbest fucking things. I mean, you're not wrong. It's just like they're not points.
What do you mean they're not points?
All you're saying is that the NFL and now college football is higher scoring than it used to be.
It's higher scoring.
Like, yes, that's very
the
true.
Defense, the good defense is not like going to neutralize a good offense where it used to. We're like not like you need a good offense to win championships. Where before it's like
that,
defense win championship.
I don't
now it's
necessarily
not like
agree
that
with that.
anymore. It's offense. The good offense wins the championship.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. Again, I'll point to the Bengals. Like, defense is incredibly important. It's just that it looks differently. Like, when you have a good defense, it's not as in your face obvious as it is when you have a good offense. When you have a good offense, you put up 35 a game. When you have a good defense, you hold them to 20.
The Bengals might make the playoffs. They won 4 in a row.
They might make
I'm
the
worried.
playoffs.
I'm worried about this game this weekend.
You know something ironic? Like, we talk about Patrick Mahomes and stuff and how good he is for the Chiefs and whatnot, but their defense has been one of the best defenses in the league for the past few years.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
have
I mean,
one of the best defensive lines. Like, they have been fucking good.
Who is this? The Chiefs?
Yeah.
Chiefs defense is really good.
Really
For sure.
fucking good.
Yeah. That's why they're 15-1. I mean, because they have a really good offense and a really good defense.
They fucking
and
play
they
with
just,
15 players on the field.
There's an all-around really, really good team.
I'm so sorry I brought this conversation up. I've never been on the side of sports ball needs to end, but this is the one that drove me off the cliff.
Good.
I can't take this conversation
All
anymore.
right. Why? Go ahead.
It's just too much.
Don't ask why.
It's just too much. Don't forget that we are doing an end of the year giveaway. Shout out to our friends over at GTO Wizard. For anybody who's interested in participating, head over to our Twitter page at onlyfriends_pod. All you have to do is let us know in the comment section to this thread what your poker goals are for 2025. I've got mine out there. I would like to win more 2,000 big blind pots. I think that's important this day and age
Did you play yesterday?
a good offense beats a good defense every time.
Did you play
I mean,
yesterday, Matt?
it's just
I did.
it's so I don't want to like have to go back to this, but it's just no, because like you're just like, this is the dumbest conversation. And my main point was that a good defense is going to have a really tough time stopping a good offense, and that's just the way it's been in the last 10 years.
Cricket.
It's not cricket. I'm trying to collect my patience. Like, yes, Brian, that is true because the league and the game is now set up to be more scoring driven. But like, that's not the way you measure a defense any longer. It's more about like what they create as far as like turnovers go, what the score is that they hold them to. Like, holding them to a field goal is now a win, where before forcing punts was the objective of the defense. Like, that's why
I'm not arguing with that.
That's why I'm just saying, like, you're not saying anything. Like, saying that offenses have advantages in football is just true. It's in the rules. Like, defenses are all at a disadvantage across the board. So, of course, the best one in the league still isn't going to outperform the best offense in the league, but it still will, just over the aggregate. It just looks different. Like I said, like, a good defense will just hold teams to like 3 scores instead of 4, which is massive. You know, you take a score off the board, it's massive.
That's not what's happened with the Steelers this year.
Against the Bengals.
They run up against good offenses and they put up 30 points against them.
Yeah, what's 30 points in the NFL?
A lot.
Not 50.
30 points is a lot.
Can't breathe.
Half of the Lions average.
Huh?
Nothing.
The Lions are an anomaly.
All right, we have a fun show. Well, I don't know if it's fun. Fun might have been sucked out of the room. We have a show today.
Jesus Christ. You tend to do that a lot.
We have a show today.
Happy fucking New Year.
I got my Yeti shirt on. We're gonna have a show today Justin Barber is going to be Justin Barber, Jesus Christ. Andrew Barber is going to be joining us at the top of the hour with Justin Balthrop, who is a PhD in finance. He used to work as a hedge fund manager and also currently is a professional sports bettor who has written some papers on the effects of legalized sports betting. So today's conversation should be an interesting one. This is going to be a conversation where I've kind of waffled on my stance on this. I was very pro legalization for quite some period of time. And I'm starting to rethink that position quite a bit, as I know Barber is as well. So should be a fun conversation to unpack and kind of dig in a little bit to the data as far as like what legalized sports betting has led to thus far and what we can look forward to in the future. While we're on the topic, though, of legalized sports betting, Pennsylvania finally coming into the fold.
Let's go.
It looks like they will become a part of the shared liquidity online poker pool in 2025. They're aiming for Q1. I guess that there are still some hurdles that they need to get over. It doesn't look like it's anything more than red tape and paperwork.
Why didn't they show a picture of Philadelphia? It's the biggest city.
It's the biggest. It's not the prettiest.
No, it is not.
That's Pittsburgh in the winter. That is a frozen fucking river.
Is it?
And it's gorgeous. Yeah, if you click into the picture, you can
Is
see it.
Pennsylvania's software newer than ours in terms of WSOP?
They have
Similar, right?
They're the same.
well, ours just upgraded.
Yeah,
Maybe
remember?
maybe it's because of that.
No, they had
no.
ours way before.
Yeah, the long and short of it is that everything around WSOP is based off of 888, their partner.
So they're using the same skin.
They're using
Yes.
them in Michigan have been using the upgraded skin since launch.
Okay.
We were the ones that were behind.
We were the
adopted
ones
late.
lagging behind.
Okay.
Jersey was lagging behind.
Gotcha.
But I believe everything should be
It
on
is.
par. Yeah, I don't think there's any differences any longer.
No,
right?
there's no differences now.
Right.
Everything's on par now.
Right. So that would bring all of the WSOP territory then into the shared liquidity at this point. Pennsylvania is currently the only outlier, with Michigan having joined last year this time? Maybe
2 years ago now.
2 years
I
ago?
think.
Yeah. But it took them a while to actually become a part of the pool.
Yeah.
Right.
It was
They were still segregated way past.
They announced it then, and then like after they announced they were going to join the pool, it
Right.
took a while.
And we might see that again with WSOP this time around, because I think, again, I don't recall all the details, but I believe that's an internal thing, not a legislation
Well, they
thing.
announced this a while ago. So what is this new announcement?
Well, they announced that they were open to it a while ago. Forever,
I thought it was that it was actually happening.
for a very long time, Pennsylvania was just completely against
Right.
the idea.
Yes.
They didn't want to lose the tax dollars, I think. And then I think this summer maybe they announced that they were going to move forward with this in the multi-state gaming agreement.
Don't they get more tax revenue by expanding?
I don't think so.
Bigger pools, more people are attracted to the site.
That's not the way it works, though,
Yeah.
because you then have to divide that based off. I mean, WSOP benefits, but
Basically, they would generate more. I guess they generate more.
I was thinking if
More tax
Pennsylvania, the state
revenue
of
on their-
Pennsylvania starts to generate more interest in wanting to play in Pennsylvania because the pools are bigger.
Well, that's the theory. You're right that you would get more people because of it. But like as it stands, they generate more tax revenue than say like Nevada does.
right.
Right. But now they have to share that with Nevada and all
Right.
the other states. So they didn't want to do that. But I guess they were convinced
you have to
that this
remember-
can grow the game, which can grow the tax revenue.
Right. You also have to remember that liquidity is not staying in house any longer, right? It's now being shared amongst 4 other pools. So when somebody in Pennsylvania loses to somebody in Nevada and you lose that
okay.
customer in
I gotcha.
Pennsylvania, it didn't benefit somebody else in Pennsylvania
Exactly.
who's going to continue to
I
pay your
apologize to the
dollars.
state of Pennsylvania for taking all your money. Why is that so funny? That wasn't meant to be that funny.
I don't know. It just is. It just is. You guys have any big New Year's Eve plans lined up?
I'll be watching the countdown from the house.
I got a flight at
Yes.
6
if I'm
a.m.
awake.
I'll be watching the countdown on your scale.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's
I did
right.
weigh in for everyone, and I weighed in front of the tortoise. I got a nice 1 pound of leeway, I guess you could call it. So we're looking good. I got 16 hours to go, something like that.
I'm not particularly excited for you hitting this bet because all you did was get skinnier. You didn't like lose body fat or get shredded or.
Oh, I did.
You know.
I definitely lost body fat.
Nah, maybe.
Yeah, I definitely lost body fat. But
He's healthier
It
than he
was-
was when he started
I
it.
feel a lot better. I mean, when I'm going on walks now, it's not as tiresome as it was before with 25 extra pounds. But yeah,
I think the next goal is to see what your body fat percentage is and try to get that down and try to build muscle.
yeah, for sure.
Think you're over or under 24.5%?
I would say I'm under 24.5. I don't think
It'd be
by
hard.
much.
What are you, Burke?
If I had to guess, I usually
20?
walk.
That's too high, right?
No, I might be now. I'm a little heavy, but I usually walk between like 18 and 19.
I saw you were like 200 pounds when you started this challenge, right?
204, I think.
Yeah.
I
We're
don't
like
know,
the
I
same
haven't
size.
budged.
Have you ever done a DEXA?
Yeah, I've done a bunch.
Oh, okay.
Um,
And when was the last time that you did it, and what was it?
2 years ago, maybe I was 18. I've just like always been even at my leanest when I was 185 after the 75 hard challenge. I did it and I was 17 and a half. It was the strangest thing. I'd lost like 18 pounds and by all accounts was the leanest I had been since college. I lost 1% on the DEXA.
I wonder what I am. Just because I don't care, but just because you guys always talk about it.
You're sub 20, I think, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean-
What about me? Knowing that I was what 5'10", like 200 when I went to
You're
the.
for sure over 20.
I know that, but like
Probably under 26, over 23.
so like maybe like 25ish around that way, 24, 25.
Yeah.
I think
Sounds like you and I have a bet, maybe, Lamana. Little body fat.
I'd like to get it down. I mean, like, what would be reasonable?
my little
Like
brother
20,
is
under
4%.
20?
I think it's very easy.
Your little brother is shredded. Yeah.
4%.
I think if you put in any effort whatsoever to your health and nutrition,
You can get under 20 pretty easy.
you should be no higher than 18.
Okay.
Like when I'm above 18, it's because I'm eating lazy.
Right.
But I also think that like the counter to that is I think like if you are putting in a lot of effort, it should be very easy to be sub 15. And I find it very difficult to get to sub 15.
Sub 15 seems.
Well, it also depends on your age, too. I assume if you're not on gear and, you're creeping up on 50, it's got to be a lot harder to lose body fat.
I mean, your age is only going to be comparable to your testosterone
I would think
levels.
if I got down, if I continue to work out, weight train, and I got down to like 175, I'd easily be closer to 15 than 20.
Yeah,
that right?
I mean, it depends like how hard you're training, I guess.
I mean, I go hard.
Like,
I go fucking hard,
I
baby.
mean, the
Me
thing
and
is,
Tony
like-
Horton, let's go.
the thing is, you're talking about losing like 25 pounds,
Right.
without, or not even without, but like while adding muscle. That's a impossible task. So it's like
Maintaining muscle. I got a lot of muscle, man. Let me
you have
tell
no idea.
Oh, I know. You want to come fill it?
I mean, that's the challenge when you're trying to get
It's
to
all
like,
in the ass.
when you're trying to get to like sub 15, you have to maintain muscle composition
Right.
without like overeating.
Yeah, like in my mind, it's like maintain the muscle that I have or gain a little and then also lose 20. I say 25, but maybe 20. Maybe it's like I get to 180.
Yeah, I still think you would be over 15%.
Yeah. I think I'd be. I'm not saying I'd be under, but I think I said I'd be closer to 15 than to 20.
Yeah.
Guess we'll find out.
I mean, it's yeah.
So the best way to do this is get a DEXA scan. it's called?
DEXA scan, yeah.
Right.
It's like the most accurate. There are ways to hack it though.
What is that process?
It's
I
effectively
think
an
it's
X-ray.
an airtight little bubble thing
really?
they stick you in, right?
No. That's what the fuck are those called?
It looks like an egg.
Yeah, that's
Oh yeah, I've seen those.
that's air displacement. It's similar to like the water
Are
displacement.
those
test.
accurate? Not as
Uh,
accurate.
less
I heard
DEXA
so.
scans-
the water is actually supposed to be
The water is the
most
most accurate,
Yeah.
but it's difficult to have done. The air displacement one is pretty big margin of error, I believe. I can't remember what they're called. They're like something pod, maybe. I don't remember. AirPod? No, that's not right.
Essentially, the DEXA scan, it just scans you. And
it's like basically an X-ray.
It can tell the difference between your muscle and your fat. And then,
with one exception, you can hack it with water. It registers water as lean muscle mass.
So you drink a bunch of water before?
Yeah, you can cheat the scan that way.
Who wants to do that? Unless I guess if you're doing
people make bets.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like the only. Because it effectively, and I think this is why I still came in at 17 when I was leaner. The reason why it reads water as lean muscle mass is because it accounts for your weight, your total weight. So what happens if you chug a bunch of water is you up your total weight without adding any fat to your body.
Yeah.
Therefore, you become leaner.
Makes sense.
Whereas I probably maintained my muscle mass, but I lost 25 pounds. So at 185, like I'm no leaner now than I was at 200.
That can't be.
Well, no, it can be.
Yeah.
Like I looked every bit smaller.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like that's why I'm saying like maintaining muscle mass is very difficult
while losing weight.
Yeah. So it's like I may have more lines at 185. I may actually look a lot leaner, but I'm also just like smaller than I would be at 200. So it's like, you know, there's a give and take there. But if I had maintained like 195 with the same level of leanness that I had at 185, then I probably would have been like 13.5% or 14%, something like that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, tough to say. What do we want to talk about? We got 10 minutes to kill. New Year's Eve. We can get to resolutions later this week. We might have a surprise guest this week coming up. Mike the Mouth.
What?
He wants to come in on Thursday and shill his new.
We're gonna have him in studio.
Yeah, well, we can't do it any other way, man. I mean, we could have him call in, but
that might be a task.
I mean, getting him here might be a bigger task, to be honest. But he's up for coming in. Let's put it that way.
The Mouth.
As long as we don't do it super early. He wants to promote his new documentary, which I have not watched yet, which means I'll have to watch it. So he's basically ruining my New Year's.
What day did you say?
Thursday.
Okay.
Yes. My New Year's Day. My New Year's Day is fucked. Thanks to Matusow. Appreciate you, kid.
That's great.
So yeah, we're probably gonna have him in on Thursday, and then we're gonna have Jesse Sylvia in on Friday. We're gonna go over the winners of the GTO Wizard thread, as well as some of our own poker ambitions for 2025. I do believe we have our special guests on the line. Both Justin and Andrew are joining us.
You have
Maybe?
Justin so far.
Okay, we got Justin.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
And I imagine Andrew will be popping in a few minutes because he knows we're always late. And I told him 10 minutes from now. But in the meantime, we can get to know Justin a little bit better. So nice to meet you, by the way. And apologies for pushing it back a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background and how we got to this point, I guess.
I guess we can dig it however you like. I got on your show from the tweet that I made a couple of weeks ago, so it's kind of nice to actually be able to get on. My background is in quant finance originally. I also did a bunch of poker adjacent things, like I was sort of an OG PokerStars guy in the first boom and stuff like that. Big online poker player, which is how I know about what you guys do and all that. After I left the hedge fund world, I went to get my PhD in finance, and now I'm a professor at the University of Kansas and do a lot of research in a lot of different things. But the thing that's getting a lot of traction right now, which is how Andrew and I got connected, is that we've been doing some research on some of the societal and personal finance impacts of this sort of legalized sports betting boom that we're in the midst of. And so he asked me to come talk about that, and happy to dig into whatever you like around that as well.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic. As you kind of mentioned, like we are hitting a bit of a boom state now, to the degree where things have changed very radically, I think, in the last 5+ plus years. We see the NBA, NFL, MLB advertising big books like FanDuel and DraftKings, which has been the biggest, no forever. ESPN Bets is now like integrated with SportsCenter. It seems as though the sports world's like fully adopted the gambling industry, whereas for decades upon decades, we see Pete Rose's ban was never lifted. He passed away, still banished from baseball for partaking. There was this big black cloud around the idea of gambling on sports in general, this seedy activity that took place with bookies and smoky back rooms of bars. But now it's become this multi-billion-dollar business, and everybody's trying to get their hands on whatever they can from the cash grab. I guess first, you partake, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like you do a lot of DFS?
I'm a big DFS player. I do a non-trivial amount of sports betting as well. It's not a hobby. It's something that I do I'd like to think an advantage player. Certainly that's the results have been that way, but obviously, variance is a big part of that as well. So yeah, one of the things that's been a big disconnect when I'm trying to, talk about this from the research academic standpoint is I think a lot of people assume when they read a paper from a bunch of academics that these are we're sort of painting with a broad brush and don't have any idea about the institutional details. And we sort of look to ban online sports betting like it's some sort of universal evil, but that's really not the approach that I take at all, because this is something that I think is a perfectly reasonable thing to allow, but I do think we don't have a good handle on like the good and the bad that's going to come with it. And we kind of need that information out there. But yeah, partaking is, I'm like 7 figures of sports bets a year kind of person.
Yeah, that's definitely dabbling, I would say. So I guess like on that front, before we dig in too much around the topic, what in your opinion do you think differentiates, if anything, between a game like poker, the notion of like gambling within the realm of daily fantasy sports versus traditional fantasy sports, and then something much more cut and dry, like just being a traditional bettor of games?
The biggest difference is the ease with which the average person can trick themselves into thinking that they have an edge. I think so to like make the poker analogy make sense for the audience that we have here, I think most people now that follow you would realize that if they read TJ Cloutier's book on pot limit hold'em from 1998, that wouldn't be sufficient to go play the super high roller bowl.
Right.
But there's a lot of people out there that think their level of fandom that they have, the level of information that they follow, and the level of first order data that they can pay for or get relatively simply is enough to beat the sports book. And it's just not true. And so I think people have this, they overestimate their ability in sports betting, I think probably greater than they would in a game like poker or even daily fantasy. You play daily fantasy for a couple of years and you'll learn really quickly whether you're any good at it. And there's not enough ability to, like, variance can sort of trick people in some of these things, but your long run win rate, I think, is easier to fool people in sports betting than some of these other forms of gambling, which is kind of the danger of it, because people will the attribution bias that happens is people will take all their wins and think they're clever for all the good bets, and then they'll think they're unlucky for all the bad ones, and they'll never have a very I think objective a sense of exactly what level of skill they have, or it takes longer to realize that maybe you're not a good sports bettor, or however you want to measure that.
Do you think that that's kind of a byproduct, in spite of the fact that traditional sports betting has been around much, much longer as something that's viable? Do you think that that's maybe a byproduct of it being a less mature legal market? Whereas, DFS has been around for almost a decade now, and online poker has been around for nearly 2.
Yeah, I don't know what the underlying root of it is. I think the ease with which you can, like, basically the online sports betting boom, I think, is a story mostly about reducing frictions. All right, you could travel to Vegas and sports bet for many years, but now you can sit on your couch and scan a QR code and be betting on women's tennis in Bangladesh inside 30 seconds, right? So there's the ease with which that you can do these things has taken, and I think that the social norm is alleviated, right? It's you went from, like you mentioned earlier, you went from having the big sports leagues trying to pretend like gambling was a universal evil to now promoting them or partnering with them and all of these things. And so I think any stigma that used to exist is going away too, which all that does is bring in the marginal consumer one by one, people who are less and less informed. You know, this is something that more people do. It's something that increases at least potentially the entertainment that they get from watching the sports in general. And now all of a sudden you've got a larger group of people, and by definition, less and less skill, if you want to call it that, around the edges, and then you get yourself in a situation like we have now.
We see that though in the traditional market too. I think like with the Robinhood app and a lot of other methodologies, as you know, online has become more free and available. The average consumer, or you know, kind of the dumb money, is able to funnel its way and play the market in a way that maybe in the 70s, 80s, and 90s wasn't actually an option. What downside impact in your research thus far, or are there any parallels, I guess, between the sports betting industry and like a traditional market?
Yeah, I think there are actually quite a few parallels, and some of them are good and some of them aren't. And I think in doing the research that we did, we found, this is obviously anecdotal, but we found a few message board posts and things like that just to kind of prove the point that we were trying to get at. There are people that look at these pools of capital as more or less equivalent. Like, I'm going to do something risky with this portion of my income, whether I bet on sports or whether I play the stock market is kind of equivalent to me, because I'm trying to do higher risk things with this. So whether I invest in a meme stock or a crypto endeavor or put it in a 5-leg parlay, they kind of look at that as interchangeable. The problem, I think, one of the problems is that the access, you know, the COVID shutdown gave a lot of people a lot of time. And for some people who got stimulus checks and things like that, they got more income and more freedom to do some things, but didn't have very many places to put it. And so a whole generation of people, and I mean, I teach investment theory at KU, and I run into this with my students in the 2020, 21, 22 years. I was constantly having to discuss with students the fact that you can play the stock market for a long time, win or lose, and never really understand enough about it. But at least when you're doing that, if you're doing it with reasonable investments or reasonable stocks, you're picking higher quality companies, you might win and lose, but it's more or less over the long term, a slightly positive expected value proposition. When you're doing meme stocks, it took a long time for people to believe this, because for a period of time it looked like the easiest money you could make. That's sort of a minus EV proposition in a pretty material way. And I think sports betting for, you know, basically everybody, most everybody, is a minus EV proposition. But they're looking at it and going, well, I don't know anything about, you know, ExxonMobil or Procter and Gamble, but I know who the Kansas City Chiefs are playing, and I know about the offensive line struggles, and they trick themselves into thinking that's the requisite knowledge. And so they take money that would, I mean, we don't have to get into the paper yet, but if you don't want to, we can wait for Andrew. But like the crux of the paper that we wrote is people are substituting away from productive investment income, right? Things that you might think of as non-risky stock market investing, and putting that into much higher risk and lower information, whether they realize it or not, and lower expected value outcomes in the sports betting market. And so the parallels, if they exist, are that I think high risk option trading and meme stock investing in crypto, I think, appeal to the parts of our gambling psyche that are ingrained, the part of us that wants to take risk on an individual level. So those parallels exist. I just think there's probably a little bit, I think most people approach the stock market when they first start and they sort of assume they're not an expert and they don't think they have the requisite knowledge.
Right.
And that provides a buffer, like a little bit of like, you know, like the little bumpers you have in a bowling alley to keep them more or less in line. And in sports betting, it's hard to convince people that that's the case as well.
taking that one step further, even if like they did have that requisite knowledge and were a little bit sharper, just kind of intuitively, aren't they kind of more punished in sports betting than any other particular market that they could choose when it comes to risk based off of just sheer rake?
Yeah, the pricing impact that exists is large, and I think the lack of numeracy in the average person is why it can be so large. But there are even the sharper people. It's just a difficult game to beat. And I was actually looking at, and this is not something I have hard data on, although we'll get into this maybe in a minute. There's a project that we're trying to work on that's going to get us some information from sports books that will allow us to say things slightly more concrete about this. But what was supposed to happen in any reasonable market is as you get more and more entrants into the market, pricing impact should come down, right? Competition should drive pricing down. And for anybody who's not clear what I'm talking about, let's just take a standard straight bet that's typically minus 110, minus 115. A lot of those bets are minus 115 to minus 120 now. And so even if you are a pretty sharp bettor, and in liquid markets, if it's minus 115 or minus 120, that's 2 or 3% of implied win rate higher than it used to be. And that's a material difference over a large sample size. Like, it's really difficult to get through the pricing impact. And now, again, this is something that I'll speak anecdotally about, but I think it won't surprise anybody. If you open up, and I don't want to use any specific sports books I'm not going to denigrate or praise any of them specifically, but if you look at almost any sports book, when you open it up, all of the bets that are being pushed to you, the average consumer, the ones that are being boosted, the ones that are being advertised to you, your favorite celebrity influencer has picked 5 games, this day for the college football slate or whatever it is. Those are all parlays, which are taking this negative EV pricing impact and compounding it. And like the implied probability of winning the bets that they push to you is excessively bad. It's worse than any bet in the casino, right? It's worse than roulette. It's worse than the, hot betting and craps. It's worse than just about anything you can do. And I think the average person doesn't really fully understand that. And so they kind of look at it as for the same impulse that makes people want to hop the 12 on a dice table because it pays 30 to 1. Never mind that it's 35 to 1 against. That's not part of the equation. These parlays that get pushed to you by these books are disproportionately pushing you into the things that are most difficult to survive in the long run, which is, I think, going to be really interesting in terms of, you have this customer acquisition cost on the front end, but you kind of need to, you can shear the sheep as many times as you want, but you can only skin it once, right? That's kind of the analogy. And when the frequency with which they push these high edge multi-leg parlays and stuff like that seems to me to have the risk of running into long-term customer fall off in a way that I don't know that everybody fully understands.
Yeah, I find that to be fascinating because that is my impulse from an outsider. I don't bet. But from an outsider's perspective, where sharps are just continually being shut out, and it seems like this pricing impact is kind of twofold. One, to skin their audience alive, and 2, to ensure that like sharp bettors can't beat them. I find it to be very much a model where acquisition now is at the forefront and retention is just an afterthought. And I wonder if that's just a byproduct of the initial floodgates opening and there being such a desperate desire to be able to gamble legally now that the demand outweighs the supply by such a large front that you can just continually gouge them in the early goings until you thin the herd to the point where these books are going to have to compete against one another the same way 2 gas stations on a corner would.
Yeah, it's certainly been I would have thought, I mean, obviously some states haven't even rolled this out yet, right? So I live on the border of Kansas and Missouri. Missouri just legalized. And so there are some states that haven't even begun the process yet. So I don't know how long it takes before we reach some sort of long run maturity in the market. But I agree with you in the sense that it sort of feels like they're taking for granted that people will still want to do this at the level they do 5 years from now. I will say that in the data that we've looked at, something that is both interesting from the econometric side, but also a little jarring from kind of the societal impact, is that we find that over time, people are not depositing the same. So basically, virtually everyone loses, of course, right? This is not news, at least over the long run. But what we're finding is that people are not replacing their deposits. You know, you deposit $100 on the first month, and maybe you make a bunch of $5 wagers, and eventually you lose that. This, on average, the second deposit you make is bigger than the first, and you're putting more money in year two than you did in year one, and that's where it gets to be a little bit dicey from like the societal cost standpoint, right? This, the purpose of the research that we're doing is to try and understand these effects, because this is not, I want to devote $100 a month or $100 a year or whatever it is to my entertainment budget. This feels very chasey. This feels like, no, I'm good at this and I just need to play the game long enough. And eventually you sort of run into the situation where maybe people start to dig into places where they shouldn't, whether that's credit cards or whether that's predatory loans, pawn loans and payday loan type of things. These sources of capital for people to chase these, what they believe to be as their gains, that are coming to them. And so if that's what the customer base looks like in the long run, even that, there's a limit, right? People can only go broke, so many times, and they've only got so many outlets to reach that. And so I do wonder how, I'm sure the people inside these companies are spending a lot of time and energy thinking about this, but right now the game seems to be just promote everything, get everybody to start, and then rely at least potentially on the addictive nature of it or whatever it is to keep the people coming back. But it does feel like the amount of money being lost year over year, I have a hard time understanding where it comes from, where it's getting replaced, if it's not just a whole new group of 18 to 21 year olds, matures into the legal status or whatever it is.
As somebody that has had a problem with sports betting, using apps and stuff like that for a couple months, it was it's always been about the chase for me in a way. Like, you lose a couple bets and then you just keep chasing, you keep going, and like there's an addictive nature, and it's just at your fingertips. You're betting first half games, like second, and it's just like you don't really think about anything really. You're just firing, and it's just the ease of the access. I think it's a true problem, especially since we're like the sports book just collect like 2%, 3% on every bet or something along those lines. I think sports betting is going to be a tragedy in the United States.
Yeah, I agree with you, Conrad. The way I would say it is that like the industry in this country anyway is like in its infancy, and like we are only now starting to figure out whether or not we have a sort of epidemic of addiction to these types of things. And I think you're right that the ease of access is a big part of it, right? It used to be, even so, I could drive 45 minutes to a casino in Kansas or at least Missouri now that they've legalized and place a bet if I wanted to. But that requires a level of commitment that for many people they don't want to make. Exactly. And so if I can just be doing this on my phone, and how all of this is going to come back to, it's the same addiction that makes people play Candy Crush nonstop, right? It's the same idea. It's the chemical release that you get when you see the app and you bet the over on, who knows, make it up. So last night, who played last night? So you bet the over on
Lions San Fran.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you can refresh that app, and it's 7-0, 13-7, 20-7. Like, you're constantly getting this sort of chemical feedback that is making you excited or sad, and you can get it almost instantaneously. Yep. And that's the thing that hooks you to it. And so we've thought a lot about how to. One of the things we want to do with the research is make sure the resources that are being devoted to problem gaming are being spent as efficiently as they can be. And one thing that is difficult to do, but we've thought about, and being someone who is a practitioner and partakes in these markets a lot, helps me kind of be able to see through some of the noise. But we're trying to figure out the best ways to measure what it looks like if all I have is your gambling record, your transactions. How can I tease out whether you might be someone at risk of having a gambling problem? And we're going to look at things like the number of times you make deposits. Do you escalate your deposits over time? Do you log in every 10 minutes? Do you make multiple bets inside the same game window? Are you, like you said, are you firing the first half? And if you lose the first half, are you firing the second half? These types of things that feel like you're sort of trying to martingale the system, because this is a thing. Martingales are bad because you run into table limits, right? And sportsbook table limits might be relatively large compared to some other things, at least for losing players. But, you know, you can lose 14 coin flips in a row. And if you play long enough, you're almost guaranteed to do so. And we're trying to figure out, maybe we can find a way to measure what that looks like to people so that we can, I don't know what the policy implication that comes from that is, but I think the first step in all of this is trying to understand and as best we can educate people so that at least if they have the predilection to have a problem, that it's not being exacerbated by a lack of knowledge, right? We're just trying to inform people as best we can, and then, you know, maybe see how that prescribes policy after that.
Do you think your research would ever be like, or any research in that matter for like something along these lines, would ever be taken by a sports book to try to help society? In a sense where, like, you're saying, like, you know, if you're taking people's datas and, like, you know, they're a big losing player, but it more seems like an addiction than anything. Do you think there's any correction from sports books to, you know, try to limit the addiction part of what the bets that they're taking?
So I can answer that sort of in two ways. Like, the first way is it'd be hard pressed to find a person more skeptical about institutions than me. Mm-hmm. And so that might infer how I feel like what the likelihood of it being something that sports bets would use. I have a hard time believing that. And I think my main reason for that, and this is true of just about everything in economics, is this is an incentive question. There is no real, to my understanding, there's no real incentive that would make the sports books want to identify problem gamblers and in any way limit them outside of any liability they might incur. There's a famous case now. I mean, obviously it just started to come out. This will take probably years to resolve, where someone is suing one of the big sports books because a family member sort of basically, you know, put them in financial ruin. And I don't know the details of the case. I don't have any legal expertise, so I can't comment on the veracity of the claims or whether that will get settled or have to go to court. But there's certainly going to be a lot of situations where people will feel like they're harmed or were on the wrong end of a predatory relationship between the ease with which they could gamble. What we want to do, I think the first and best thing that we can do with the research we're trying to work on is make sure that the consumers are as informed as they can be. Yep. And if and when this starts to happen, when policymakers, the next time someone wants to re-up the gaming licenses, or the next time a new state wants to roll out online gambling in their jurisdiction, that we have as much information in the hands of policymakers as can be, and then it's kind of up to them at that point. But I mean, I take your question well. I just think it's difficult. I don't know how to align the sports books. I think if they're not, I've already used the phrase myopic whore on your show once before, but like there's a certain short-sightedness to the acquisition game, which is it's cheaper to keep somebody than it is to acquire them. So let me get as many people as I can and try and hold on to them as much as I can. I don't know how you fast forward 5 years from now with the rate with which people lose and the compounding house edge that they play against. It becomes very difficult for me to understand. I feel like personally that the addiction is becoming like will be a very core part of the long-term monetization process.
Yes.
But at some point, I mean, you can be as addicted as possible. If you cannot get a hold of funds, it doesn't matter anymore. And I worry about the speed with which people get to that phase, right? The people are speed running this. And part of that is because there's this pent up demand in this country for whatever reason. It's a fascinating sociological problem to study, and I don't have a good answer for it. It feels like we have a tremendous amount of demand to gamble. And now, whether that's presidential markets or whether that is online poker or whether that's sports betting or whatever else it might be, I mean, I saw you can bet on some of these markets whether or not Jimmy Carter would die, and that you could watch the time series of that market as we got closer to the end of the year. I mean, it's hard to imagine a lot of positivity coming from that.
Agreed. So maybe can you see states stepping in and just making policies toward cutting off losing bettors in a sense, or addictive bettors, people that have this this patterns of addictionness?
I think it's going to be, so the states have the same incentive alignment issue, right? The reason that they're doing this at all is because of the tax revenue. Yeah. And so to cut off, when you have a system, so as we said before, when the winners are cut off by the books and the losers are, and let's roll this forward, if the losers are cut off by the state or by, problem gambling resources or whatever it might be, that is by definition a reduction in revenue. Do I think that's Pareto improving society? Probably so, but I'm not sitting in the office making the policy at the state level, so I wonder how to make it align. I think the states, if you could convince the states, it's a complex answer. If you could convince the states that 20 years from now, the amount of social safety net resources that are going to have to be deployed to help people out of poverty who have succumb to the problems of gambling in whatever form it might be is sufficiently large, you might get them to act today. But the problem with most political situations is the people making the decisions today are optimizing on a very, very short-term time frame and have no incentive to think about what the world is going to look like 20 years from now. And so I think that's probably, if I could get in the room with someone who was going to be a policymaker for 20 years, maybe I could use data and convincing arguments to show them that there might be a reason to step in and not abolish, but let's just cut people off a little around the edges, maybe have some sort of limitations and things like that to help people not speed run going broke, gambling in a degenerate fashion. We might be able to do something about that, but I don't think that avenue exists, which is, I think, going to be the problem that we'll wake up 10 years from now and realize.
I also think that ship has kind of sailed, right? That's what staved off legalized gambling for the longest period of time was that narrative being pushed by the quote unquote boomer generation that this is destructive. And, we all remember Sheldon Adelstein's stance on online gaming and things of that nature. I want to backtrack a little bit. We kind of fell into solutions, and I want to zoom back out a little and discuss the problems and the paper that you and Andrew have written. So Andrew's joining us now. Welcome. Catch you up a little bit.
What's poppin', Andrew?
For anybody who is unfamiliar with how we even got to this, Barber put a tweet out a couple weeks ago basically quoting a recent study, and he said several papers have come out regarding the effects of legalized sports betting, and every single one that I've seen has found bad outcomes. I used to be pro legalization, but I can't hold that opinion anymore. Walk me through a little bit how you changed your stance, because I'll give my own anecdotal story with regards to this. I probably haven't thought heavily about this subject since maybe 2014, 2015, when online poker had first started to re-legalize, and Sheldon Adelstein of the Venetian had a hardcore stance against and was lobbying heavily to remove this. And it seemed like it was very selfishly motivated. He wanted to keep people coming to casinos. He didn't want the ease of access online. And at the time, as much of a pariah as he was to the poker community, and as much of a villain as maybe he was portrayed as to gamblers, I kind of felt compelled to side with him a bit, in the sense of not necessarily a skill-based game like poker, but for sure house edge-based games like roulette and blackjack and whatever else you could potentially offer online, where now it felt like the amount of volume that the general consumer could put in would ensure that they were fast-tracked to going broke. I kind of stuck a pin in it once it seemed like those floodgates had opened, and we had all decided collectively as a society that this was just going to move forward. And I championed the fuck Sheldon cries because he was harming online poker. But now fast forward 10 years, it does seem like a problem may be presenting itself, and your tweet kind of insinuates that you've changed your stance a bit too.
Yeah, there's a lot, as always, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think that if you found yourself agreeing with Sheldon, like it might have been the case that he arrived at the same conclusion as you, but for different reasons. Like he's obviously motivated by self-interest.
Yeah.
This is such a difficult topic, especially when talking to a bunch of people that enjoy gambling. I don't know. I early in my career, my poker playing career, I felt the ethical dilemmas that professional gambling presents. And I don't know if that's true of everyone, or you have to bury it or stick a pin in it, and set it aside. And because I think it can be difficult to wrestle with that constantly. I mean, I think that we craft convenient narratives to justify our, continued gambling. And there's a strong, I mean, I don't know if this is the justification for this, or this is a inevitable outcome, but it seems like there's a libertarian bent amongst poker players, which makes sense because you kind of have to have that attitude, to accept, the realities that are kind of being described here. So yeah, I think that I was largely supportive of, legalized, regulated poker, and I guess by extension, sports betting. But I think I didn't really appreciate the harms associated with that. And then maybe within the last few years, I've really started to appreciate that addiction is a serious thing. And maybe more importantly, I think operators are getting better and better at extracting money from the most vulnerable gamblers. You think of how slot machines are designed now. And I'm sure everyone has read stories of people who are compelled to sit at slot machines for insane amounts of time because we're pretty much our mind is being controlled. We've been hacked. And I think that, anyone who has experience with serious addiction has to consider that we are tiptoeing up to that line where gambling and drug addiction are, if they're not overlapped, they're adjacent to one another. And if you think about gambling in that light, I think you have to start considering the need for rolling back some of the legalization efforts or more extreme regulation. I think Conrad's question to Justin about, how do you align the incentives with operators? I totally agree with Justin. I don't think you can do it with carrots. I think you do it with sticks. I think you come up with penalties, evidence-based policies that maybe restrict gamblers. I know when I was coming up, first legal poker I played was in St. Louis. They had a max bet. You could only lose $500 every, I think it was few hours or something like that. I thought it was silly at the time, but I wonder if they were onto something.
Yeah, this is, I guess, such a struggle because I've changed my mind on so many things as I've come into adulthood. Very similarly, my stance on the war of drugs, growing up in a very small community that I've seen become more impoverished as the steel mill industry has collapsed and has been flooded with, Section 8 housing, and with it comes a massive, massive drug problem. There's a methadone clinic a quarter mile outside the town walls of where I grew up now, and it wasn't like that whenever the steel mill was flourishing when I was a kid and everybody was there as the working class, so to speak. So I was staunchly for the war on drugs growing up. I saw it as a total drain on society, and it seemed like it was progressing, or it seemed like it was at least incentivized by keeping people healthy and off street. As I've gotten older, though, I see so many inefficiencies in that notion of putting a taboo on something. It just doesn't seem to work. It seems to fail at the structural level. And then you just end up with wild levels of incarceration. I know I'm kind of moving the goalposts here a bit because the drug epidemic I guess choose your drug, the crack epidemic of the 80s, maybe heroin more so of now, as well as oxy and shit like that. But I wonder where the happy medium is, because I think we can all look back and say that, like, you know, Reagan's war on drugs has ultimately been a systematic failure. But conversely, is it going too far then to say legalize but regulate is the clear solution to integrating a society with something that appears to just be a net negative in general? And the parallels to gambling. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the drug war is like a fantastic analog, insofar as I think that most people would consider it a waste of resources up until a point, and now I think that there is a growing consensus that fentanyl is different than other drugs that have occurred before. Like, I think that there was evidence that you could have reasonable legalization or decriminalization policies for a number of drugs because they could be used in not a healthy fashion, but it wasn't like incredibly destructive to society. And I think that gambling has kind of like had this same evolution similar to drugs, where it is of a form now where it is so pervasive and so addictive and so harmful. I mean, I was just looking last night at the stats. I think it's something like 60% of men aged 18, Justin probably knows the stat, but like 60% of men aged 18 to, forget the demo, 35 or something like that, have sports bet. Like, that's insane. That's an insanely large number.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you're talking about something that is attached to the fabric of our society, right? Like, the big difference here is that, like, you can't attach destructive drugs, like when you're talking about the really bad ones, heroin, now fentanyl, and things of that nature. You can't really attach them to some popular aspect of culture. Perhaps music, you know, maybe there was a small attachment with like hallucinogenics and an era of music, marijuana and era, but like those are relatively on the safer side. With betting, attaching it to sports, the most popular, or one of the most popular things amongst males within our entire country, it's you know, kind of an injected in my veins type of thing, where even when it was stigmatized, it was still a cool subculture thing to do, you know. And the horror stories haven't changed. Like, there's no evolution to the downside here. The like, you watch a movie like Bookies made in the 90s, that tale is still the same now. It's just, instead of some random thug breaking your legs because you can't pay, it's now you know, a major corporation coming for your house because you had to lay collateral in order to get enough. And I'm obviously exaggerating, like, these aren't the most common outcomes, but like, this is what we see at the tails. And I think that that's ultimately what the paper that you and Justin have written are kind of like.
I gotta stop you right there. This is Justin's paper. I have nothing to do with that.
Okay, he made it seem like you guys partnered. No. Okay, gotcha. So the paper that Justin has written, it seems like that's kind of like where the focus is. It's start with the worst case and kind of bring it back more towards the average and see how much impact is there.
Yeah, well, let me also say that I've got 4 other co-authors, but you know, just to make sure that I don't want to self-aggrandize that either. But yeah, to get back to like the libertarian point, because I mean, that's obviously where I come out on this sort of personally, is that, and we've presented this paper. We've actually had a former senior executive from Harrah's discuss our paper at a conference, and a lot of the most common pushback we get is, who are we? Well, first of all, like, the paper is not designed to say that sports betting should be outlawed, and that's just what people assume we want to do. But the pushback we get is, who are we to say how an individual should make their consumption choices? For example, if you want to eat, I mean, literally the 2 examples that we're given is like, especially for young men, is like, if you look at the consumption patterns of young males, who are not the only, but the dominant archetype for sports betting and online sports betting, you know, if you're trying to cater to these people, like, it's pornography and cheeseburgers, and it's like, maybe those things are bad for them too. And who are you to say? And there's a big part of me that says, well, first of all, if you could prove to me, and we don't have to get into like the empirics of how this all works, but like, if you could prove to me that giving access to cheeseburgers or pornography would cause people to make destructive financial decisions for themselves that would have ramifications far into the future, I would want to know that too. But beyond that is what we can show, what the paper shows, I think pretty clearly, is that this is not a substitution. People have not decided, oh, I used to do this risky consumption behavior, and now instead of that, I do sports betting. They're pulling the money from what would otherwise be potentially productive uses of funds and feeding this new thing. And I think the inflection point that I've had personally on this, and where the libertarian in me gets to be a little bit self-reflective and have some trouble, is that it's not immediately clear to me anymore that the gains and losses, the good and the bad that comes from winning and losing and doing sports betting, accrue only to the individual doing them. And that's where I get really stuck personally. We are in the process of trying to look at some outcomes that would be suggestive, at least, that maybe sports betting has a larger damage radius than just the individual. And when that starts to happen, I don't know that we can use the same libertarian norms to police it. I certainly would believe personally that if we could constrain, like, I don't smoke marijuana, but I don't care if you do. It doesn't hurt. I don't have any desire to regulate your access to that. One thing that helps me get there is that I'm happy to be wrong on this and can educate myself and learn, but I don't know a lot of ill effects that are going to have a blast radius that's really large. I'm not so certain that's true with sports betting, right? So one study that I'm not a part of but want to shout out has looked at the incidence of the home team losing as a favorite and connected that to intimate partner violence. This is like this is to be oversimplified here. This is basically saying, when you legalize sports gambling, suddenly the home team losing as a favorite leads to domestic violence increases. I think it was about 10% increase in domestic violence incidents. That's material, and that's excessively important, because that is one of many possible outcome variables that says it's not just you sitting on your couch and going, I lost $10 on the Bills game today. If that's all it was, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I was going to go out to Buffalo Wild Wings, but now I'll just bet $30 on the game instead. If that's all it was, I don't think there'd be much to say. And I think we could all kind of, well, first of all, these papers wouldn't have been written and we wouldn't be having the discourse that we're having. I think the blast radius is bigger than the individual. And I think the societal costs are going to be bigger. And that's where it gets a lot harder for me to understand how to thread the policy needle with all of this.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point to highlight, and one that shouldn't be overlooked. My knee-jerk pushback is, how much should the government be interfering or caring about that blast radius? Not because it's not impactful, of course it is, but more so because how involved should they be with interpersonal relationships? But again, you can parallel this to drugs, because that was the easy sell in the war on drugs, is that the blast radius of a junkie is not self-contained, right? It's destructive to the family core. It's destructive financially. It's destructive. It branches out well beyond the individual, not just to their immediate family, but to their non-immediate family, their friends, and then it's a strain on the medical industry and all this other stuff. So I think you're making a very compelling argument. I just wonder, where does it end, right? I have no ability to calibrate what the optimal response is. And as somebody who, again, I'll editorialize personally, I'm not convinced that the centralized government institutions are the optimal way to solve very many problems. I think maybe there's some they're well equipped to do, but many they're not. And so I'm not even sure that's the right way to do it. I think that what I would say, and this is hard, I think this is a good thing to be discussing, because
better to get a sense of this now than wait for the negative ramifications to happen fully before we turn around and look backwards and try to solve the problem. But the issue with the policy discussion and discourse at this stage of the game is, I mean, our paper is one of the first ones to even start diagnosing what the problems might be. We don't really have a good handle on exactly what this is doing, good or bad. And if someone writes a paper and says, actually, you have no idea, this leads to this positive outcome, then we welcome that discussion to the discourse as well. We're just trying to figure out, I mean, we have a patient and we're in like the triage stage of figuring this out. So we're very careful in the paper to say what we can say definitively with the empirics that we can do. And we're only just now starting to think about and there will be probably dozens more papers, because this is a hot topic over the next couple of years, that will allow us to say something pretty definitively. Here is what is happening. And then and only then can we make an effective policy choice. But I'll say this, it is very difficult to move people's priors. When we were pitching this idea in the early stages to some of my colleagues and people would, in just casual discussion, I don't think very many of them would believe or believed that we would find what we found. And so it's to try and speculate on what we might find in the future or how you convince people to shift their own priors is a really complicated and slow moving game that has to be done. And we're only now, I think, starting to people go, oh, I didn't really thought about this I just thought as well, I like to sports bet or go to the movies and I'll choose between the two. No, that's not it at all. Now you go to Buffalo Wild Wings, and while you're there, you bet on the game. And while you're another thing, I mean, sorry to kind of skip around too much, but one thing that we've started to look at as well is that it's amplifying people. I mean, the crux of the domestic violence paper is the idea here is that it's not just that you've made a losing wager, is that you've made a losing wager on the team that you most passionately support. There's an argument to be made for sports betting in like a very broad economic theoretical sense, like that we want to have a complete market and that sports betting allows people to hedge socioeconomic and emotional outcomes that they otherwise couldn't do. But it turns out that in practice, and there's anecdotal and survey evidence for now, but this is something we're trying to look at. It turns out in practice that people don't emotionally hedge; they lever themselves. So you have this sort of financial leverage that comes from I'm now bankrupting myself by putting sports bets on my credit card and paying 40% interest on top of 20% vig, and I'm never going to get out of that cycle. But instead of going, well, it's Christmas Day and I really want the Pittsburgh Steelers to win, so let me bet on the Chiefs. And if my utility function contains socio and economic and emotional things alike, when the Chiefs win, I've got a little more money and that helps offset that. And if they don't win, I'm okay. I'd pay $10 to guarantee a Steelers win anyway. Mm-hmm. What's happening, and this was true in Kansas when they legalized betting in Kansas, the number one bet that everybody got a free bet, as part of the promotional tool. And the number one use for that free bet was Kansas City Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. And people are not using sports betting to do anything sort of sophisticated and hedge their utility in that sort of way. They're doubling down on it. Mm-hmm. And so you have the tribalism that comes with sports, the passion that comes from sports. Now I'm mad that my team lost and I lost money on top, which is, I think, the crux of why I believe the mechanism that's implied by the paper on domestic partner violence is that you're tapping into the psychology of the male sports tribalistic thing in the first place, and then you're levering on top of it. And right. I think I mean, there's no way to police this, but I think that's one of the things that if I was trying to paint a picture of a way that sports betting could be at least non-detrimental, like the way you would have complete financial markets, it's a reasonable case to be made. But we, as a society and as a psychology collectively, don't do it that way. We double down. It's like if you make the final table of the main, you don't go make a side bet that you're going to win. Right. That's the wrong way to do. Some people, they want to lay that off a little bit, right, to kind of hedge. That's not how people are using sports betting, at least not on average. That's not how people are using sports betting markets. So it's another thing that we're sort of starting to learn now.
Yeah, I think your examples there are very good. The making the final table of the main, it's it's literally just a financial decision. So you are just hedging one simple thing. But when you are a fan, you're right. You're pulling in the emotion. There's nothing less desirable to me than that emotional financial hedge that you just proposed. I would rather not bet than have a win-win situation like that, because it feels like a betrayal to my fandom in some sort of capacity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. When KU won the national championship in one of the first years that it was all legal here, and so I'm teaching my class in the spring while all this is going on, and I was trying to explain, because I teach like utility theory and things of that nature, where all this would come together, and I was trying to explain to the kids, like, well, a diversified portfolio, to reduce the total amount of variance, you sort of, as a risk-averse person that most people are, you don't really want to have. You want to reduce the amount of risk in your portfolio. If you're going to go to the game and you're going to drive down to New Orleans and root on KU to win the national championship, if you're going to make a wager, you should wager on the other team so that you can reduce that. But it's the same thing. Nobody does it for the reasons that you say. And I like I said, I'm not surprised that it works that way in practice for the reasons that you get into. But that's at least a place where sports betting markets could form some sort of potentially, positive, play a positive role, but people don't use it that way. So it kind of falls on deaf ears, I guess.
Justin, you mentioned socioeconomics, and it made me think of a certain segment of the population that's really going to be affected by this, like lower income households. Everybody in this room can make a $50, $100 bet this weekend, and we're still gonna be able to pay our cell phone. We're not gonna beat up our significant other, and it just it does feel dangerous for those segments of communities where it can have a real impact on their finances.
Yeah, so our paper specifically, I mean, we find the effect, it broadly generalizes, but the thing that one of the hooks to the paper that we wrote is that the financial effects that we find are more binding for people who are financially constrained. And that is not necessarily only income driven. We define that in several different ways, but yeah, we find that people who are already, like, people's credit card debt goes up, their availability to make credit card payments goes down. Things like that, we attribute causally to the advent of online sports betting. So I agree that there is, this is why it gets so tricky. Like, this is the incentive problem, right? If you are someone who has, a lower income, there are mechanisms in place. You can't borrow $500,000 for a house because someone will check whether you can make those payments. Now, you're not borrowing $500,000 to sports bet either, but you are at least potentially borrowing money to sports bet. And there's not really anybody there to say, well, we shouldn't let you do that. And this goes down a really tricky and a very dicey route. But if you want to, if you wanted to have this where it would be less likely to damage people who are least able to afford the losses, then you have to have some sort of connection between, I'm not saying you should have to apply to be able to sports bet. You shouldn't have to run a credit check or anything like that. But there should be some way to know whether the person on the other end, to have some idea, if you're going to throttle them for non-skill based reasons, you have to have that information. And I don't know how talk about a layer of administration.
It makes me think a little bit about WSOP. Like, when we signed up for our WSOP account, we need to put down our social, we need to put down our address, all of our information. And maybe this is a little intrusive, but as far as KYC, perhaps having to do an income tax return as well, and limiting this person to sports betting 2% of whatever their net is a year. I don't know, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but.
No, I agree. That's where, so I agree kind of in principle, right? In broad strokes, I think if we ever do anything, and Matt's point about this ship may have already sailed is probably salient here too. If we end up doing something tangible in terms of regulating the levels of sports betting that people have access to on an individual basis, it probably does have to look something like that. That is, I don't know how. Here's the other problem: as soon as we do something like that, and you pass that administrative cost on, the next time you go to bet the Super Bowl, it's -118 and not -110, and so they're going to pass that right back to people, and so. What's going to happen is that might actually help some of the people that would otherwise be able to get out over their skis a little bit. That will help them rein that in at the expense of now making it even more minus EV for the people that are doing it, even within their means. And so these things are very, very tricky to walk between. But I mean, I think your point makes sense.
Yeah, I think
general.
that I think there are a few things there that that stand out to me. One, there's kind of a baseline being created where, and poker's trending this way, particularly online, where the model is created such that you cannot win. It's becoming much more of a casino, right? And the sports betting model is very much already this, because they're going to throttle or completely blackball sharp bettors in some sort of capacity. So if it's already set up as a tax on its consumers, where they're basically just paying into a fund that they can never withdraw from, certainly you want to do something to raise the barrier of entry such that you're not being predatory on people who are already financially strained that think they are betting as a way out, right? Trying to harvest some amount of windfall that will get them advancement in their life. What strikes me as a potential simple solution that probably won't ever take place because, incentives and not cutting yourself off at the knees. But if you upped the minimum bet size to like $500, you alienate 80% of the betting pool. Like, most people will just be turned off by that level of risk. Currently, as it is, people are kind of being led down a path of slowly getting hooked. They're getting their first bet for free. It's truly like the street drug version of getting somebody to become a good customer. You get them their first high for free, and then you sell them on the cheap shit, and the next thing you know, they're a customer for life. I wonder if, like, creating a high barrier of entry, like a $500 barrier of entry, you're no longer really giving any access to the low socioeconomic people, because that amount of money is just insurmountable to them. That not only represents rent, but like, we're talking, sheer livelihood. This isn't entertainment funds, but people who can't afford those bets often will be doing pretty well for themselves. It's not going to necessarily come with such a detriment, but now you might be cutting the market from multiple billions to just hundreds of millions, and that in and of itself is almost never going to fly, I assume.
Yeah, we're probably several months away from we're in the data collection process to be able to say something more concrete about what percent. I don't have a good sense of what percent of the handle is coming from $10 bets versus $500 bets. I don't have a good sense of that right now. We're in the process of trying to get some data that will allow us to say that. My guess is that, a few things, right? There's a reason that penny slots are like the number one, attraction in casinos now. It's because everyone can at least start playing on them. And I wonder how much of the business would be cut off if they did something like that. My guess is it's a pretty large amount. But I agree with the process of incentivizing people and targeting people with, you're more likely to get a free bet when you're losing or have lost recently, right? Because they know if they make it too terrible, if you have to let them win every once in a while, or else people will stop. I mean, that's the idea behind the psychology of the penny slot in the first place, is that they found that people would put 500 pennies in a machine, and if you gave them 375 back, they would feel like they won. Right? The old school slot machines are not popular anymore because it's so binary. You just win and you lose. And so that's another place where they can scrape things from you. You can cash out your live bets and stuff like that. It's also very complicated. I do wonder, I worry that, I have a worry that people would find a way to do $250 or $500 bets anyway. And I think, not to get down an area where I'm not an expert at all, but I think one of the things underlying all of this is there's a guy, a shout out, Ben Hunt. He writes a Epsilon Theory. He writes a newsletter. He's coined the term, I think he coined the term financial nihilism, which is where people are struggling right now. So it's purely coincidentally, or maybe not purely, but close enough to coincidentally, right now things are difficult for more people. Food is expensive, energy, housing is expensive, and many people have come to the conclusion that if I just go do the normal, quote unquote American dream path, I'm never getting out of this. And so they gamble as a way. In finance terms, we call it gambling for resurrection, when you basically are at the point of, if I don't do any better, then I'm going to go bankrupt anyway, so might as well swing for the fences. And I think that's at least potentially driving a lot of this demand for the betting impulses in the first place. I mean, that's
Right.
why I do bet a lot of esoteric markets, but I'm fascinated to know, and hopefully I'll know here in a few months, how many people are betting on things that they have not even a passing clue about.
Mm.
Right. Who knows? It's one thing to say, well, I'm watching Monday Night Football, and every person who's a sports fan will at least be able to trick themselves into thinking they know a little bit about it. But when that Monday Night Football game is over, I can bet on Korean basketball right away. And there's just no way that the median person has not even an edge, but there's no way they even think they do. It's just, you might as well have a roulette wheel right there, or a scratch off lottery ticket right there. And I think, I don't know how to stop the acts. I don't know. It's such a complicated problem. I think we're going to be talking about this for years, one way or another. But all of these things are.
Well, it's all a
coming together.
cascading effect, right? Like, we've been having this conversation for the entirety of my life anyway, when you're talking about the lottery and all these other, even like you mentioned high interest credit cards, payday loans, all these predatory things that exist that often tend to prey upon those who, as you kind of described it, are financially, nihilist. Like, they just can't do any better, so they're willing to take a bunch of upfront risk in order to basically fast track ruin when it's all said and done. And I think that that's the crux of all of this. I don't know how much your paper pulled this out, but the crux of all this is not that these markets shouldn't exist, not that we shouldn't be free to do as we wish with our money and whatever our impulses may be, but more so that the operators themselves should not be at liberty to be so predatory to basically seek and destroy. And that personally is what aligned me with the side of online casinos seem dangerous, man. Because they're just a seek and destroy mission. They're a fixed 1 to 7% tax on every single bet that every single human is capable of making. And as we've discussed so far, like, it's intoxicating to chase that high. I wonder, and maybe you guys can each give me your opinions on this or speak to it a bit from the paper standpoint, but how much of this is predicated on all of these vices moving into a digital world as opposed to the prior analog version that was a lot more hoops to jump through in order to get action down?
Yeah, I can go quick first. And so there's a reason we did this we used the legalization of online sports betting specifically for that reason, because the mechanism that we have in mind is the ubiquitousness that exists, right? It's just too simple. There's no frictions at all. I think I think one of the things that is most important about this, one way you can protect people from predatory actions, if that is what ends up happening, if we're able to find that in the data in the future or not, is to educate them on exactly either the mathematics or the probabilities, or however you want to think about it. What they are ultimately, in my mind, what the operators are ultimately preying on is not only the pure chemical fun and kind of chemical dose that you get from the winning and losing, the resolution of a wager. They're able to do so with such ease because of the lack of numeracy of the target audience. People are trying to maximize the probability of a success. So they bet huge favorites with no sense of the implied probability required, or their only thing they care about is hitting a home run. So they're willing to do a 9-leg parlay and they think I'm getting 100 to 1 on this, and that sounds amazing, even though it's 1 in 10,000 that they're going to win it. And so trying to educate them along those ways will do a lot, I think, to stop or at least mitigate the predatory nature of it all. But we hope to have more. The current paper uses very specifically the rollout of online gambling because that's what we think the mechanism is. It's the ease of access. My hope is that we'll be able to say something more concrete in the near future about exactly what does the profile of the bettor who gets sent the more offers and things like that look like. And right now I can't speak to if it's predatory or not. It may very well be kind of random or, relatively egalitarian. Everybody kind of gets a free bet a month or whatever based on how much action you give. My hunch is, from my own experience, is that the more you win, the less they give you. And so they're probably incentivizing you to come back more as a losing customer than a winning customer.
Well,
and then
even if they're just shutting sharps out.
Well, that's clearly, I can't bet ping pong anymore. So,
right. So like that whole throttling mechanism, whether it's just reducing their bet size or completely eliminating them as a customer, that in and of itself kind of insinuates a bit of a predatory model that they've created, I think. Yeah,
well, hopefully we'll be able to weigh in on the size and scope of those things as much as we can. Yeah.
What about you, Barber? What are your takeaways or thoughts about the digital aspect of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I pretty much am in agreement with both of you. It's weird because economics generally wants to reduce frictions in markets, and this seems like an environment where more friction is better. And I'm almost of the opinion that the old way of doing things, where you would have a bookie, and you would find out about the bookie through word of mouth advertising, that this might have been a better system. I mean, you come up in poker and everyone had a bookie, but the people that didn't have bookies were like college age kids. That was something that was relegated to later in life. And I think that system kind of worked. And I don't know, I don't see why this is better without having a complicated utility model in which people are deriving pleasure from gambling. And I think without that, you'd be hard pressed to argue this model is better than the previous model. But I do understand that, like, we are offering a service that is demanded. I don't know if that is sufficient to have completely open access to this form of entertainment. But yeah, the online thing I think is incredibly problematic. And I think it's like the slot machines that are designed to hack our brains. I think it's like the drugs that are more hardcore Matt, you and I have talked a lot about like nutrition and obesity. And I think that people have a genetic predisposition to obesity that didn't manifest until we had hyperpalatable food and, a lack of movement. And so I think the conditions are such that people who have this predisposition then fall into this trap. And then we just have more and more traps that we can fall into now. And as much as I would like to say, like, let's just leave people to their own devices, let's not be paternalistic, I think we're seeing there's numerous problems with that attitude.
I can't agree with you more. When I used to have my local bookie, I didn't know that Korean basketball started at 2 a.m., the Japanese B-League at 3:30. I didn't know all this shit. I waited till Sunday, I put a bet in. But no, I found out that Korean basketball starts at 2 a.m. and the fucking Sangwon Thunder is just about to beat the shit out of these guys or I lose. And it's something that nobody should ever know about. And crickets start running at 6 a.m. if you guys want to bet on some fucking racing crickets in Bangladesh. It's absurd. It is like the ease is just absurd. By the way, I banned myself from every sports book while we were sitting here talking.
Good for you, Con.
That's amazing. That's a very evolved response to all of that. They have 4-point lines in some of the foreign bats, so the overs are definitely coming in over there, right? So just there's your.
Wait a minute. Conrad just re-upped his account.
Nah, they're all out.
Barber, I'm curious what your take then is to a parallel of this of sorts, like something like Polymarket, which is effectively zero sum, where it's just peer to peer. Do you think that this allows for a healthier version of us getting our fix?
I mean, I'm really bullish on prediction markets. I get a lot of pushback on this too. I think that if I were going to have, like, if I wanted to have an outlet for people to gamble, I think prediction markets are more socially valuable. I mean, like Justin brought up Jimmy Carter's the market for his death. You're never going to find a faster source of news than that, because it's going the true state of the world is going to appear there before it's ever in a news article. There might just be a small amount of latency there, but that is the way that news is going to be consumed going forward. And so a bunch of people who follow this stuff, who are somewhat sharp, I think that there are positive externalities there. But I obviously, your point earlier about how this is, part of American society, is well taken. And I don't know if you ever make this go away. Something I have thought about on and off over the years is this idea of creating like more like zero sum or positive sum gambling opportunities. So something that exists, and there's a branch of research on this, prize linked savings accounts. And so people are encouraged to save, and then all of the interest that's generated from that, and this could be subsidized if you want to like encourage savings, can then be allocated, in like a lottery style payout. And so you're incentivizing people to save. Like, I think one of the interesting findings from Justin's paper is that basically the gambling, like the discretionary funds that go into gambling, almost perfectly crowd out what would have gone into an investment. Like every dollar you lose gambling is potentially a dollar that you could have invested. And I mean, there's going to be like long-term ramifications of that. And then there's also another paper that finds, the risk of bankruptcy goes up and your credit score falls, and like you're going to pay for that. I mean, years down the road, but these people are discounting the future at such a high rate, which is true of people who gamble or are problem gamblers. They're not considering 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future. And I think that, if there's one takeaway from this, I think Justin captured it really well, which is, this is going to be, you need someone, a government official who's thinking on a 20 or 30 year horizon to think about this stuff, because no one is incentivized in the short term to think about this.
I think that's well stated. I also think it's pretty problematic. Never in the history of man is it maybe been more difficult to project the future 20, 30 years down the line than now, with the rate at technological change and just the exponential growth of things. I think like what used to be a 20, 30 year horizon timeline is more like a 3 to 5 year timeline in current time. Maybe I'm overestimating that or over exaggerating that a little bit, but the point does still kind of stand a little bit that we have no idea the direction that the world is going to be moving as we begin to integrate things like AI and more technology along those lines. But I do like that notion that you kind of mentioned, where people do want the risk. That's abundantly clear, and giving them the ability to risk in a zero sum, slightly positive sum type of way seems more in line with where I was going with like the poly market example. I think that's a nice one, because you're gambling the same as you would be any other way, but it's a true traditional market. You can cash out without penalty anytime along the way that you see fit, both on the up and the downside of things. It's strictly peer-to-peer, so nobody's like manipulating lines. I mean, I guess technically it's maybe small enough liquidity in some of these bets where lines could be manipulated, but the point is that like nobody's incentivized to just add a tax to the line because they're the bookmaker and they want to eat too.
Well, there's a way to do to make sports books. I think there's one actionable thing that would help. This is all around the margin. Is if you're going to push to me when I log in, if you're going to push to me, a plus 800 parlay of nonsense, you should have to make a two-way market in that. I'd like to bet that it doesn't happen. And if you made them do a two-way market, the pricing, again, you're going to be losing. It's never going to be you're still competing. They're still losing on both sides, but
Yeah, but
you
now the
can't-
VIG is like 5 to 8%
you can't screw
or
me on the
whatever.
price anymore because the smart money's going to come and say that's not happening, and I'll lay 9-1 that it doesn't happen. And that's a way you can. Again, this is just that slows the bleed at least, which is I think a positive thing. But allowing people to make one-way markets where all of these things can be compounded, and that's the preying on the enumerate. Median better. They have most people are not thinking about that in terms of implied win probabilities.
It would be much clearer. Yeah, it would be much clearer on like how much you're getting gouged for sure.
I'm lost on what one-way market means.
With parlays, like the same game parlay is a great example. It's the most popular these days. There's no way to bet the not, right? Like the book just gets to give you whatever odds you're willing to accept, and if you're getting 100 to 1 in a spot where you deserve 1,000 to 1, they don't care because there's nobody betting the other side.
Yeah, you can't bet that the Yankees won't win the World Series this year. You can bet they can.
Yeah, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I got you.
All of those futures markets would be so much more price efficient if you had to do them two-way, but they don't.
Yeah, that's a pretty simple regulation that I could see being pushed, and a sharp one. And hopefully. This is kind of the last thing I want to touch on before we let you guys out of here. But hopefully, as this market does mature, there will be some level of education that takes place both at the operational level and at the government level. And it'd be nice to see guys like Justin and Andrew leading that way. You guys are out here doing the legwork, or at least Justin is with the research paper and stuff. It'd be nice to be able to present that to somebody who's actually able to impact change of some sort. I wonder how much this has to do with a large societal shift that I personally feel like we've seen more so in the last 20 years than ever before. You kind of mentioned that dollar for dollar, everything that is getting lost, sports betting, would have otherwise maybe gone into a more traditional investment of sorts. When I was growing up as a kid, the education system would push you towards those more traditional paths of, sticking your money in the S&P 500 or buying real estate, much more traditional investments that, I'm old enough to remember when opening a savings account and getting 10% annually was definitely still a thing. I wonder how much of this growth and boom in the gambling side of things is contributed to the fact that there aren't as many safe investments as there were prior. Like our grandparents' generation, our parents' generation, they had a lot of blue chip stocks that they could have just got in early on, or as we kind of mentioned, the overall market itself has just seen year over year growth, and if they were smart with their money, they could have put it in even like government CDs and bonds and done pretty well. That's in large part, I would say, reduced for current day. But even that aside, the money making mechanism now isn't the old adage, of make your money work for you, don't work for your money. Like that was what I grew up on, And now that I have liquidity and wealth, I don't really know what they meant. Like I find myself maybe taking slightly lower risk gambles, but I'm still constantly putting myself at risk in order to have some sort of like exponential returns such that I don't have to work a 9 to 5 year over year. And to me, this all just feels like it trickles back to education, right? Like so much of the non-traditional paths of making money these days are just creating consumers. So becoming an influencer and developing an audience now just gives you a consumer base to sell to some corporation, right? It seems like this is becoming much more of the current exchange where it's just operator and consumption and finding ways to basically separate people from their money, as opposed to the past where it was more like the consumer was building the operators. They were the heavy investors that were getting this new technology off the ground. They were helping fund all of this great change around the world. And as a return, they were getting, reasonable interest rates on stocks and bonds. They were getting, reasonable returns on these smarter investments. To me, and maybe I'm a bit jaded, I just don't see that as being very viable if I'm a young 18 to 25-year-old. But taking a shot at myself becoming a gambling tout and developing a multi-million person audience that I could then sell for 10 cents per person that follows me to a DraftKings or a FanDuel seems like a much easier path.
The only thing I want to push back on there is, or not even really push back, I try to contextualize a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, although these things are cyclical, yes, you can't put your money in a savings bond at 12% anymore. You also could have mortgaged your house for 2.5% for a decade. That's the thing that your parents and my parents and people of that ilk, didn't have the opportunity to do. These things are all cyclical. The thing that I think is most dangerous about the mentality that you're putting voice to is not that there are that many fewer investment opportunities. Yes, the S&P 500 is relatively boring, and over the long term, I mean, it's not been a terrible investment over the last several years. The problem is that people's calibration is permanently screwed now. The generation that grew up on crypto, on buying JPEGs of rocks for $30 million. I mean, it's not just that many of those things are going to be a wash in the end. It's that it's ruined the individual's calibration for what a reasonable return is. And so they think, if it's not giving me, if I can't 5x my money, what am I bothering with?
Right.
That's the wrong way to think about. At least, now, I'm not saying, look, I can get there on having a small port of anybody's portfolio being, let's do some high risk stuff. But if you want to have, a mature investment portfolio that's going to be maximize the chance that you get to age 50 or 60 or 70 and have all the money that you need, taking the risk of ruin that, some of these horrible, addictive crypto scheme type things look at is not the right way to do it. And you have to be able to go, sometimes you're just going to make 6% in T-bills and 9% in the S&P 500 for a couple of, that has to be okay. If that's not okay, systematically, if your brain is like, that doesn't make any sense to me, that's the part that I worry about. I mean, I teach young people every semester. I worry that they have lost the ability to calibrate what a reasonable rate of return even is.
I think that it's a lot that it has to do with the people just don't have a lot of money to begin with, right? So there's a lot of, they don't have savings, so they're trying to spin up the little bit that they have into something that is actually worth protecting or having a reasonable rate of return on.
They're also trying to beat inflation, which
that's also true as well.
Which does feel like it's becoming a more daunting force.
Right. You feel like if you're making 9% a year, you're breaking even.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So as that rate of return has to increase, and the thing with crypto and these other newer markets that have created billionaires and also, drained people to zero, it might be the second iteration, because you have to remember that our generation grew up on the tech bros, where if you're not 100xing, why are you even wasting your time starting? You know what I mean? And these inflated valuations that they were able to sell companies at, Uber's a great example, where it was $1 billion valuation out of the gate, but it was losing nearly that year over year. Right? You're selling them on the idea of the tech, but the execution is actually just a giant money pit. That delta never existed in traditional markets prior. You couldn't come up with an idea that sounded good on paper, lost infinite in practice, and then sell people on a 10x multiple. So I do think that the American dream shifted pretty heavily post industrial revolution, wherever that ended. I don't know. Maybe it was around the Cold War era.
Revolution, maybe.
But wherever the tech revolution began, I think that the American dream greatly shifted away from the grinded out, nose to the grindstone, lunch pail community that was going to work really hard, save their money, make sound investments, and then retire at a certain age with a nice nest egg, to, I don't want to work a 9 to 5. I want to create generational wealth, but also I want to contribute in some sort of meaningful way. Like those two things started to pair together, right? Like I can make societal change and create generational wealth at the same time. Okay, that's my new American dream, but it wasn't available to the masses. You know, now you're talking about a 1% type of long shot as opposed to the guy who went to the mill for 50 years and ended up with a couple million in the bank by the time he was 65. So I do wonder how much of this just distills down to a lack of opportunity, a lack of education, a reframing of the utility of money in general. And to your point, you know, what a reasonable interest, return of interest would be on any sort of investment, and how that correlates to inflation. I've been very guilty of it. Throughout most of my 30s, I faded all assets and all investments because I just couldn't find one that would make me a greater return than what I felt poker was offering me. It's like, if I can make 40% on my money year over year in poker, where else am I going to find that? And that was such a foolish outlook, because you're not recognizing the compounding risk of having all your eggs in one basket. But it was relatively true too, in the sense of all I'm doing is de-risking by taking these low return, low risk type of investments.
Yeah, and as didn't matter how liquid you were too. You weren't taking that money that wasn't being in play and investing it where you could have.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I would just play bigger.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. You were never liquid enough.
Right. Right. Sorry, there was a question there. I guess, like, do you find that then to be why these gambling markets, as they present, start to be more of, I guess, a desirable path? Maybe due in part to the fact that people don't know that if they become good, they can't win.
There's two things that, so yes is the short answer. The thing that kind of loops into something else that you were talking about too is and something that I have a personal passion against, is the amount of people who have tried to build a platform by teaching people how to lose money sports gambling. Now, obviously, that's not the sales pitch, but the grifter economy that pops up around this. People are selling their expertise, selling data that could otherwise be gotten for free. These types of things really frustrate me, because this is an accelerant to the problem. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to lose at sports betting at whatever the rate is, if I'm paying for somebody to tell me what to do on top of that, they're flipping coins, right? And even I mean, it's just like, I run into this when I teach in markets as well. The second that I'm willing to sell you my can't lose stock, portfolio process, it's irrelevant. Like, why would I give it to you for $1,000 if I can make more than 1,000 on my own? And so people, just the amount of people who have turned the addictive thing into, now, so we're layering things. We've got the addictive negative EV and quote unquote investment. And now the thing you're talking about, I want to be an influencer to make money. Now I'm going to try and tout sports picks or fantasy ideas, or sell you data, or build you a tool that, to a person who's not informed, looks fancy and amazing and seems like you're a genius, but to anybody who's informed knows it's not really that good. And that whole economy on top of this is exacerbating all of these problems, is the only thing I'd say about it.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. One last question to get us out of here. This one's for you, Barber. Do you think that this then parallels to online poker? Like, do you hold the same opinions that online poker may come with the same, I guess, downside risk societally?
Yeah, this one's tricky. I think that, I don't know, at various times I've tried to liken poker to being more of a leisure activity. Like, you could argue that golf and poker are similar in the sense that they both have like an expected loss per hour, like the greens fee and all the costs associated with golf divided by the time it takes. That's like your hourly. and rec players have like a negative hourly. And so I think they're similar. And then poker has the appeal of like, okay, occasionally I will bring home more than I sat with. I think when you have the opportunity for people to lose more than they're comfortable with, which I think like poker mechanically makes it a little bit harder. Whereas sports betting, if you wanted to blast off every hour of every day, you could. Whereas poker, I think, because you are limited by the way the game is constructed and the way the action takes place, and I think that it's not as bad, but I think it could be potentially problematic. I don't know how you find a way to protect people from themselves, but I think that should be a central focus for anyone operating in this area, for any politician who's attempting to regulate this. I think, unfortunately, the incentives are like really messed up here. It's certainly, I would imagine that part of the reason that states really want to adopt this is I worry about a lot of states' budgets. My home state of Illinois and Chicago, I think, is in really dire straits. I was just talking to someone yesterday about how if any city goes bankrupt in the U.S., it'll be Chicago. And if it does, it probably happens in the next few years. And that's never happened before, or at least not at that scale. I mean, we've had cities go bankrupt before. But yeah, I mean, they're all trying to plug holes in their budget. And this is seen as a solution, but of course it's short-term thinking. They're what's the term, Justin? Myopic whores. And I understand that, especially with politics, the incentives and the timeframes are so short. No one's thinking long-term. And so, we might be in this predicament, indefinitely. But I hope that people who have the ability to affect policy, or maybe that starts conversations, where we can maybe tinker around at the margin. I mean, that's where stuff happens anyway. We're probably not going to have prohibition, but maybe you can have some policies at the margin that make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well stated. I think online poker has a whole different subset of problems with the direction that's taken between operators being less incentivized to allow winners to win, as well as players being less incentivized to obey the rules and actually offer a fair game. That aside, I do think that there's a pretty stark difference as far as like the dark path that a person could head down. I like your analogy of like golf and the greens fee. It's just losers don't lose that fast, particularly in the MTT environment where I think the majority of the new money is coming in flux. So hopefully, at least as far as like our little corner of the gambling sector is concerned, we're doing a little bit better. That's not to say that there isn't downside risk and that there aren't cases of terrible things happening. I know that Joey Saul today put a tweet out, kind of very dark and sad to see, but he said that, recently, or maybe it was as of today, a Central Florida poker player took his own life at a very young age. And he was just kind of speaking to the downsides of gambling. And it as a podcast that very much champions gambling, and, we talk about all the highlights. And I did this yesterday. I posted, a session graph where I lost 425K, and just want to remind everybody it's not all about the highlights. The world is real, and you're taking on exponential risk every single time that you step out there and you put yourself in a position to gamble. So like there are tragedies that occur. There's a lot of downside risk in anything that you do. Poker not being unlike anything else. I just hope that whenever all the dust settles, we kind of get ourselves in a position where, and I'm speaking mostly to poker here, I don't care that much about sports betting, and I definitely don't care about online casinos. But I guess lumping them all together, I hope we end up settling in a place where it's not predatory, that the operators are not the focal point of who gets to benefit from these markets existing. I'd like to see it be at least a little bit more two-way between the operator and the consumer. And I know that the state's going to have to take their cut and everything else, but I just don't see any sustainability if the sole goal is to just separate people from their money. All right. I didn't know if anyone would chime in. That's fine. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Justin, mostly appreciate the myopic whore comment. We've called this back a bunch.
I'm never going to top it, so I'm just glad. I'm glad you got some run out of it.
You know, the funny part is that I remember the comment very vividly. I don't even remember what it was a reply to.
Oh yeah. Gosh, maybe I don't either right now.
Right, because that's how good it was.
Yeah.
That's when you know you got a banger on your hands.
Yeah, I don't know. I get the number of people who fancy themselves, whether it's MTT experts or whatever, it's certainly a larger number than exists in real life, and that was the impetus for it. I can't remember somebody. Right. Oh, it was everybody complaining about not getting the free pass to the free roll.
Yes,
that's what it was.
Yes. That's right.
Because they're just like, well, I'm out here losing in tournaments over and over again. How come I don't get a free pass? That's what it was. Yeah.
Man, you found that really, really quickly, Guapo. Great work. Really on your ball today. So yeah, let's leave everybody on a wonderful quote here by Justin. For every reg that's a myopic whore. For short-term EV, that's facts. And you know what? That's also true of the operators. They are too myopic whores. So that's going to do it for us today. Justin, thank you so much for joining us at PhD DFS. If you want to give him a follow, he's doing a lot of wonderful research in this area, as well as teaching at KU. Barber, Happy New Year, my friend. Appreciate you joining us. We're going to have a long, you know what? It's perfect. We're going to have you back next week, and we're going to talk health and nutrition because it's the new year.
Right.
The gyms are going to be full. The Ozempic shots are going to be flowing. I'm going to be juicing. We got a lot to discuss.
I'm so excited to talk about it because I'm starting to experiment here January 2nd or 3rd. I have a body fat test, and I'm actually convinced that the lean muscle loss with the GLP-1s is a thing. And so I'm going to attempt a bulk while continuing to use these. So we'll see how that goes. Nice.
Oh, that's actually going to be a really fun experiment.
Yeah.
Because I too hold that opinion. I think that you do lose a fair amount of lean muscle mass. So I'm excited to hear your results. Let's plan for it. We'll talk about it next week. Thank you as always for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
That's going to do it for us. We'll be back again Thursday, taking tomorrow off. Lamana's already hungover.
That's right.
We were discussing, we were like, you want to do a New Year's Day show? And Lamana's like, I'm out.
No, come on. What New Year's Day? Like, give Guapo a day off. Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, this is about me, Matt.
well, the thing is that, like, he's the one that's actually working here. We're just, blabbing, and he's actually doing some real work. So let's give him the day off.
That is true.
Burke, Penn State, minus 11.5. Who you got?
Lay the one, baby.
well, who's got the defense, right?
We are.
Give Guapo the day off. He's going to go fucking to Home Depot and get a job.
Jesus Christ. We'll be back Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific. Thank you guys as always for joining us. We'll see you then.
Later, squad.
Peace.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Oh, my God.